Imagine for a second, right, that you are recording the lead vocals for this major, highly anticipated animated film.
Oh, yeah. Huge deal.
Right. Huge deal. So you go into the booth, you absolutely pour your heart into the performance, and the studio officially releases it.
Yeah.
Your fans are thrilled. I mean, they're streaming it, they're adding it to their playlists, they are deeply connecting with your voice as the emotional core of this cinematic universe.
It is what you expect. Yeah.
Exactly. And then, exactly 16 days later, that same studio released the exact same song for the exact same movie, but sung by a completely different person.
It is, it immediately breaks that fundamental illusion we have about movies and music.
Right.
Because we are so conditioned to expect this one-to-one relationship. You know, one hero on the screen, one definitive voice on the soundtrack.
Yeah.
And when that equation fractures, it doesn't just create a logistical puzzle for the record labels. It creates an absolute shockwave of confusion for the audience.
Welcome to Future_Music Deep Dive. If you've been following our ongoing exploration of the Korean music industry, consider this a highly analytical, brand new chapter in our All About Gwyn Dorado in Korea series.
Yes.
We're looking at a verified, incredibly fascinating release record surrounding the animated film Teenieping, Legend of the Whale Heartstone. The song is called Light of Love.
Right.
And as of right now, there are two entirely distinct, officially released vocal recordings of this exact composition, like one by Gwyn Dorado and one by HYNN.
And our goal today for you, the listener, is to figure out what this dual version reality actually tells us. Like, what does it mean for an artist standing when they share a track list like this?
Exactly.
How does a release schedule psychologically rewire fan expectations? And perhaps most importantly, if you are the management team representing one of these artists, what are the actual tangible commercial risks you have to navigate when the digital ecosystem has to accommodate two versions of the same soul of a movie?
And just to set the stage for you as we navigate this, because, you know, anytime you introduce two incredibly talented vocalists attached to the exact same intellectual property, the internet loves to turn it into a gladiator match.
Oh, instantly.
Right. But we are bypassing the drama completely. We aren't here to play favorites, and we aren't here to advocate for one singer over the other.
No, not at all.
We are going to look strictly at the mechanics of the global music industry, the intricacies of digital rights, and the fascinating psychology of fandoms. We are separating what we can actually measure from the myths that tend to fill the void when things get confusing.
Which is absolutely essential, because the moment you step away from the verified timeline and you start guessing at the internal motives of a film production studio.
Right, the fan fiction starts.
Yeah, exactly. You aren't doing analysis anymore, you're just writing fan fiction. So to understand how the industry machinery processed this event, we have to start with the concrete chronological reality.
So let's lay that timeline out, because the dates here are the absolute foundation of the friction fans are feeling. It didn't just come out of nowhere, you know, it was essentially engineered by the calendar.
Right.
On July 20th, 2026, an album hits the digital shelves. It's titled Special OST Part 2. And right there on the track list, Gwyn Dorado is officially credited as the vocalist for the song Light of Love.
That is our anchor point, July 20th. The public gets its hands on the first piece of musical IP from this specific narrative arc.
Right. Now the clock starts ticking. We move forward just over 2 weeks to August 5th, 2026.
Yeah.
This is the date the main film OST drops. And sitting on this main soundtrack is a completely separate recording of that exact same underlying composition, Light of Love, but performed by HYNN.
16 days apart.
16 days. Now, I mean, in the grand sweep of history, 16 days is nothing. It's a vacation.
Right.
But in the modern streaming ecosystem, particularly in that pressurized lead up to a major film release, 16 days might as well be a decade.
It really is.
It is an immense amount of time for a piece of media to marinate in the public consciousness.
It's the incubation period for cognitive anchoring.
Okay, unpack that.
So, in behavioral economics and psychology, anchoring is this phenomenon where the first piece of information you receive about a subject becomes the permanent reference point.
Right, the baseline.
Exactly. Every single piece of subsequent information is judged, weighed, and evaluated against that initial anchor.
Let's put this into a real-world perspective for a second, just so you can really feel how this works. Think about the classic dilemma of reading a beloved book before going to see the film adaptation.
Oh, that's a great example.
Right. When you read the book first, your brain does the casting. You decide what the protagonist sounds like, you set the pacing, you establish the exact emotional resonance of a scene. that version in your head becomes the default.
Yep.
It becomes subjectively the true version. So when you sit down in the theater and the movie starts, even if it's a cinematic masterpiece, you cannot help but compare it to the anchor. You're like, well, that's not how she said it in my head.
Exactly. And when we apply that to the Teenieping release strategy, the mechanics are identical. Gwyn Dorado'S version was not a leak.
Right.
It wasn't a low-quality rip shared on a pirate site. It was an officially sanctioned, heavily promoted release tied directly to the film's cinematic universe, explicitly labeled as Special OST Part 2.
So if you are a fan eagerly consuming every breadcrumb of content leading up to this premiere, you hit play on July 20th, you hear Gwyn's voice, you hear that specific soaring melody, your brain effortlessly wires those two things together. Gwyn Dorado is the light of love.
The emotional bond is forged right there.
Yeah.
So when August 5th rolls around and those same listeners encounter HYNN's version on the main OST, they're not processing it as a brand new song.
Oh, wow.
The neural pathways are already laid down. They are experiencing it as a variation, or, depending on how fiercely they attach to the anchor, a deviation from a song they've already assigned to Gwyn Dorado.
But this naturally begs a massive question about the behind-the-scenes decision-making. Like, when you look at that 16-day gap and you see two different vocalists singing the same song, it's incredibly tempting to ask if someone panicked.
Right.
Like, did the producers release Gwyn's version, change their minds in the editing day, and hastily commission a second version from HYNN? Or was this a deliberate, calculated A/B testing strategy from day one?
It's a deeply natural question to ask because our brains are constantly seeking narrative causality. If A happens and then B happens, we desperately want to believe A caused B.
Exactly.
But if we are being rigorous here, we have to acknowledge that the verified sources offer absolutely zero visibility into the internal production whiteboard.
Right. We have no idea what the group chat between the director and the music supervisor looked like.
None. The internal production history is a complete black box. We do not know why two vocal versions were commissioned.
Yeah.
We don't know if a dual version rollout was baked into the pre-production budget from the start, or if it was an 11th hour pivot. We cannot confirm any dramatic narrative of a last-minute replacement or a contractual dispute or a creative disagreement.
So basically what you're saying is that attempting to reverse engineer the studio's motives based purely on the release dates is a trap.
It's a huge trap.
It's like trying to deduce the entire recipe of a complex cake just by tasting the frosting. Like, you might have some good guesses, but you don't actually have the ingredients list.
That's a perfect way to look at it. Both masters are officially released. Both are sanctioned by the rights holders.
Yeah.
Beyond that, the why is obscured.
But here's the thing about human nature, and particularly the nature of digital fandoms. They absolutely abhor a vacuum.
They really do.
If a production studio hands a fandom a massive, confusing, puzzle-like two versions of a lead song separated by 16 days and then refuses to provide the instruction manual, the fans are going to write their own manual.
Oh, 100%.
They are going to fill that void with their own protective instincts, their own biases, and their own anxieties.
And that transition from a corporate silence to a community-generated narrative is exactly where things get complicated.
Yeah.
Because while the studio's motives are a black box, the audience's reaction is highly visible.
So let's talk about that reaction, because we have a very specific piece of qualitative evidence to look at. We're examining a translated discussion from a Naver Café.
Right.
And for anyone who might not be deeply immersed in Korean internet culture, a Naver Café is essentially a heavily moderated, community-driven forum. It's usually centered around a very specific niche, often a particular artist, a TV show, or a cultural phenomenon.
Yeah, it's very targeted.
In this particular instance, we have a sample of 14 translated comments reacting to this dual release structure.
14 comments. It's a very specific, highly localized data point.
And the emotional temperature of these 14 comments is off the charts. Like, you read through them and you see this intense cocktail of emotions. There is genuine surprise that a second version even exists.
Right.
There is profound disappointment that the release wasn't as straightforward as they had initially believed on July 20th. There is a fierce, almost familial protectiveness over Gwyn Dorado. And unsurprisingly, there is a loudly stated preference for her specific rendition of Light of Love.
Which is a fascinating psychological artifact. But this is where we have to be incredibly careful about how we weigh evidence in the digital age.
Okay, how so?
These 14 comments are qualitative data. They give us a high-definition snapshot of the emotional reality for a very specific, highly engaged subset of people at a highly specific moment in time.
Right, but I can hear someone listening to this saying, come on, if 14 people are taking the time to go on a forum and write paragraphs about how upset they are, where there's smoke, there's fire, doesn't that prove the studio messed up?
No, it proves that the studio's release strategy created friction for those 14 people. But we cannot commit the analytical error of taking a self-selected focus group and mathematically scaling it up to represent the general public.
A self-selected sample meaning, well, these aren't random people stopped on the street.
Exactly. A Naver Café dedicated to an artist or a specific niche is, by definition, an echo chamber of high-affinity users.
Yeah.
These are people who actively sought out a forum to discuss the minutiae of an OST release. They do not represent the casual moviegoer who takes their kids to see Teenieping on a Saturday afternoon and casually listens to a playlist in the car.
Right, right.
We cannot point to this thread and say there is widespread mainstream confusion or the general public is demanding answers.
We have documented confusion within the 14 comment sample. That is the boundary of the fact.
Precisely. We have documented confusion within the 14 comment sample.
Burden mark.
We have to decouple the intensity of their emotion from the validity of the narrative they are constructing.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, the fervor of a fandom is not forensic evidence. Just because a group of fans is fiercely loyal and deeply prefers Gwyn's vocal tone does not objectively prove that her version is musically superior.
Hey.
Music is subjective, There's no scientific instrument that measures better in art.
Right. And more importantly, to the business side, their anger doesn't prove she was wronged.
Exactly. You cannot use fan outrage as proof of a contractual breach or an unfair demotion or a malicious industry conspiracy. The emotion is real, but the conspiracy is unverified.
But let's look at it from their perspective for a second. If I'm a fan and I have been listening to Gwyn's track for 16 days, and then suddenly HYNN's track drops and it's labeled main OST, I mean, you can see why they felt a sense of whiplash.
Oh, the psychological reaction is entirely understandable. It goes back to the labeling.
Yeah.
When the studio named Gwyn's release Special OST Part 2 and then labeled HYNN's the main film OST, they introduced a perceived hierarchy. Even if the studio considers both tracks equally important to the franchise, the nomenclature itself implies a primary and a secondary asset.
Which practically begs the fans to view it as a competition.
It creates ambiguity. And in the absence of clear communication from the producers saying, we love both of these interpretations and they serve different thematic purposes in our rollout, the fans defaulted to a zero-sum mentality.
They assumed one must be the real version and the other must be an alternate or a mistake or a replacement.
Yes. And we need to be very clear here. HYNN's version is not the definitive or final version, nor is having a dual arrangement like this highly atypical or proof of some massive conflict.
Which means we, as outside observers, have to juggle two contradictory truths at the same time. Truth one, the fans' emotional whiplash is a completely valid reaction to a confusing sequence of events. Truth two, the conclusions they drew from that whiplash, that Gwyn was replaced, that HYNN is the final definitive version, that the whole situation is some unprecedented violation of industry norms, are entirely unsupported by the actual record.
It's a classic case of the map not being the territory. The map the fans drew is full of monsters and trapdoors, but the actual territory is just two official audio files sitting on a server.
But even if we strip away the drama and the conspiracy theories, the sheer reality of having two distinct, officially sanctioned masters of the exact same song creates a fascinating, highly complex logistical reality for the people whose actual job it is to manage these artists.
Oh, absolutely.
If we pivot away from the emotional fallout and look purely at the commercial architecture of this situation, it is incredibly messy.
It is a profound challenge for an artist management team, yes. But before we get into the risks, we have to establish the most vital, concrete takeaway from this entire scenario.
Which is the asset itself.
Exactly. The noise of the internet cannot erase the ink on the contract. Gwyn Dorado'S official soundtrack credit is a legitimate, verified career asset.
Yeah.
It is a permanent fixture in her professional discography. It is not a demo. It is not an outtake. It is a globally distributed piece of intellectual property tied directly to her name. It lives in the catalog, on Apple Music, on Genie Music, on Spotify.
And just to pause on that, because I think casual listeners might underestimate the sheer gravity of an OST credit in the modern music economy, particularly in South Korea.
Oh, it's massive.
An OST is not just a side quest for a vocalist. It can be a massive engine for discovery. It links your voice to a cinematic narrative, which can drive incredible long-tail streaming numbers.
It is a highly coveted portfolio piece. It establishes industry credibility and acts as a passive revenue stream. So the absolute baseline reality here is that Gwyn's team secured a major win. She has the credit.
Right.
It should be respected in all industry discussions as Gwyn Dorado'S official special OST version of Light of Love.
Okay, I love grounding the conversation in that reality. She has the asset. But, and then this is a big, but you're her manager. You're sitting in your office, you log onto the back-end data portals, and you see that your artist's biggest new track shares its exact title, its underlying composition, and its cinematic universe with a completely different track by a different artist.
Yeah, that's where the headache starts.
Right. From a purely administrative standpoint, what keeps you up at night? Because to me, it sounds like an absolute algorithmic minefield.
Algorithmic minefield is a very apt way to describe the potential discoverability risks. The core issue is that streaming platforms, the actual computer architecture at Spotify or YouTube Music, are built on metadata. They organize the world through tags.
Let's break that down for the listener. When you say metadata, you mean the digital tags attached to the audio file, like the title, the artist, the genre, the release date.
Yes. Think of a streaming platform like an impossibly massive library. Every single song is a book. Metadata is the card catalog system that tells the librarian exactly where to shelve the book, and more importantly, how to find it when a user asks for it.
Okay, so if I walk into the Spotify library and I ask the librarian for Teenieping Light of Love, what happens?
This is where the dual master situation creates friction. Because each recording exists as a separate audio file, they have entirely separate metadata profiles.
Right.
They have different release dates, different primary artist tags, different album assignments. They are entirely separate ledgers.
So they're living completely separate lives inside the algorithm.
Precisely. And this introduces a significant attribution and discoverability risk. The algorithm has to decide how to map these two tracks. If a user types a vague search term like Light of Love Teenieping, which version does the search engine index first?
Oh, I see.
Does it prioritize the track labeled main OST? Does it prioritize the track that was released more recently? Does it look at the user's past listening history and serve them the artists they are more likely to enjoy?
Right, because the algorithm's entire job is to guess what you want with the least amount of friction possible.
And when it encounters ambiguity like two identical titles for the same movie, it has to make a programmatic choice. Furthermore, you have the risk of algorithmic playlists. If an editor at Apple Music is curating an essential K-pop OSTs playlist, they are very unlikely to include two different versions of the exact same song.
Right, they will pick one. Which one gets the nod?
Exactly.
Let me jump in and play devil's advocate here, or at least voice the concern that I know fans have when they hear this kind of analysis.
Sure, go ahead.
If we accept that the algorithm has to make choices, and if HYNN's version is labeled the main OST, doesn't that inherently mean Gwyn's streams are being actively cannibalized? Isn't her version just getting buried on page 2 of the search results permanently?
I have to stop you right there because this is the exact pivot point where analysis often devolves into speculation. We must strictly separate a potential risk from a measured outcome.
Okay, unpack the difference for me.
A risk is acknowledging that the architecture of search engines could theoretically cause a discoverability issue. An outcome is claiming that it is happening.
Ah, I get it.
The verified sources we are working from do not measure any actual visibility loss for Gwyn. They do not show a ranking penalty. They do not provide data proving that her streams are being diluted or cannibalized by the existence of HYNN's track.
So the idea that the main OST tag gives HYNN a permanent algorithmic advantage is just a theory.
It is entirely hypothetical. We cannot invent a scenario where algorithmic splitting is actively suppressing one artist. We do not have access to the back-end analytics of these platforms.
Right, we can't see the real numbers.
We don't know the click-through rates. We don't know the search conversion data. Converting a plausible discoverability risk into an announced factual outcome is a critical failure of analysis.
That makes perfect sense. It's like saying if you leave your house, there is a risk it might rain. That is a true statement about risk. But if you then declare, it is currently pouring rain and I am soaking wet, Without actually looking out the window, you've jumped to an unverified conclusion.
Yes, exactly.
We know the algorithmic risk exists, we just haven't looked out the window to see the streaming data.
Exactly. And there's another crucial mathematical reality here that fans often misunderstand. You cannot aggregate the success of a composition across two different masters.
What do you mean by aggregate?
Fans sometimes want to combine the numbers to prove the song's overall dominance. They want to take Gwyn's 2 million streams, add them to HYNN's 3 million streams, and say, look, the song has 5 million streams.
Oh, I see. But the platforms don't see it that way.
The platforms absolutely do not see it that way. Every single metric, a Spotify stream, an Apple Music play, a YouTube music video view, a promotional short view, must be tracked by its specific recording, its specific platform, the territory it occurred in, and the date. You cannot lump them together. They are distinct products in the marketplace.
Which means if you actually want to understand how these tracks are cataloged, how they're tracked, and ultimately how they generate revenue for the artists, you can't just rely on typing things into a search bar and guessing how the algorithm works.
No, not at all.
You have to look at the underlying paperwork. You have to dive into what is arguably the most misunderstood, mythologized, and complex part of the entire global music business: metadata and music rights.
And this is precisely where so many online debates go off the rails. Fan communities are incredibly resourceful. They find public databases, they pull up registration codes, they see dense industry terminology, and they immediately start drawing massive legal conclusions without actually understanding what the mechanisms do.
Okay, well, let's become industry mythbusters for a second. Let's walk through this labyrinth.
Let's do it.
One of the most common terms you see thrown around in these debates is a cue sheet. Fans will pull up a public registry, see a cue sheet, and say, aha, this proves everything. What is a cue sheet actually doing, and more importantly, what is it not doing?
Let's strip away the mystique. A cue sheet is essentially an administrative receipt. Its primary fundamental purpose is to document the use of music within an audio-visual production. A film, a TV episode, a commercial.
So it's a list for the studio.
It's a list for the performing rights organizations, or PROs. Groups like BMI, ASCAP, or KOMCA in South Korea. The cue sheet lists exactly what song was used, how many seconds it played for, what kind of use it was it background music in a diner, or the main title theme, and who wrote it.
And the PROs use that receipt to pay people.
Exactly. But here is the critical limitation that is almost universally misunderstood. Cue sheets are designed specifically for composition-related performance reporting.
Composition-related.
Right. They wrote performance royalties to the songwriters, the composers, and the music publishers, the people who wrote the notes on the page and the lyrics.
So if I am the singer, but I didn't write the song, the cue sheet isn't my paycheck.
Precisely. A cue sheet does not normally route a vocalist's master royalties. It does not establish who legally owns the sound recording. And it absolutely, unequivocally does not prove the terms of the private contracts that allowed the music to be in the film in the first place.
Okay, you just touched on the actual mechanics of getting music into movies. Let's unpack the two big licenses required for that, because I know they are the lifeblood of soundtrack administration: synchronization and master use.
Think of these as the two keys required to unlock a piece of music for the screen. You cannot use a song in a movie without turning both keys.
Let's say I'm making a movie and I want to use the original Beatles recording of Hey Jude during a big emotional scene. What do I have to do?
First, you need key number 1, a synchronization license, commonly called a sync license. This is permission from the people who own the underlying composition, the sheet music, the lyrics, the intellectual property of the song itself. This license gives you the right to synchronize that composition with your moving visual images.
Okay, so I go to the publisher, I get the sync license, and now I'm allowed to use the song Hey Jude.
Yes, but you can't use the Beatles version yet. You just have permission for the idea of the song. You could have your lead actor sing it or hire a local band to cover it.
Ah, okay.
If you want to use the specific iconic recording of John, Paul, George, and Ringo playing it in the studio, you need key number 2. A master use license.
And that comes from a different place?
Usually, yes. You have to go to the record label that owns that specific audio file, the master recording, and negotiate permission to use their specific sound recording in your film.
So bringing this back to Gwyn Dorado and HYNN, the producers of Teenieping obviously had the sync rights to the composition Light of Love, likely because they commissioned the song internally.
Exactly.
But then they executed 2 separate, distinct master use situations. One for the recording session with Gwyn and one for the recording session with HYNN.
Exactly. And here's the crucial point for anyone trying to analyze this situation from the outside. Sync and master use permissions and the financial compensation attached to them arise from private confidential contracts.
Not public records.
Exactly. They do not arise from public cue sheets. You cannot log on to a PRO database, look at a cue sheet, and deduce the financial reality or the legal standing of Gwyn Dorado'S private contract with the studio.
The paperwork the public can see is just the tip of the iceberg, and it's not even the part of the iceberg that dictates who owns what. That is a massive misconception cleared up.
Yeah, it's a very common one.
Now, what about these acronyms that look like barcodes? You always see fans throwing around ISRC and UPC codes as definitive proof of ownership or exclusivity.
Let's dismantle that right now because it is one of the most persistent myths in digital music fandom. Let's start with ISRC, which stands for International Standard Recording Code.
What is it, actually?
It is simply a unique digital identifier for a specific sound recording. Think of it like a digital license plate on a car.
So Gwyn's audio file has one license plate, and HYNN's audio file has a completely different license plate.
Yes, every time that specific audio file is played on Spotify or broadcast on the radio, the system scans that license plate to tally the usage. It is a tracking mechanism.
Okay, I follow.
But, and this is vital, a license plate tells you nothing about who legally owns the car. It doesn't tell you if the car is leased, if it's fully paid off, or what the insurance policy looks like.
So having an ISRC attached to your track doesn't prove that you have exclusive rights to the song.
It does not encode legal ownership, and it does not dictate the terms of royalty disbursement. It just means the file exists and is being tracked.
And a UPC.
Universal Product Code. It's exactly what it sounds like. It identifies a release or a product as a whole, like the entire Special OST Part 2 digital album.
Oh, like a barcode.
Just like the barcode on a box of cereal at the grocery store identifies the product for the checkout scanner, the UPC identifies the album for the digital retailer. It proves absolutely nothing about who is entitled to royalties or what the scope of an artist's contract is.
Okay, so let me throw a very specific scenario at you, because this relies on the exact kind of logic you see in heated online debates.
All right.
Let's look at the current reality. Gwyn's version of Light of Love is still legally available right now. You can go to Apple Music, you can go to Genie, and you can play it. It has its own ISRC, its album has a UPC.
Yes, it does.
Doesn't the simple fact that it is still available for purchase and streaming inherently prove that she wasn't replaced? I mean, if the studio had a falling out with her or decided to scrap her version, wouldn't they have issued a takedown notice and erased her version from the internet?
That is an incredibly common logical leap. It feels intuitively correct, but I have to firmly dismantle that assumption. The continued availability of Gwyn's master in the digital catalog does not prove that no replacement decision occurred internally.
Wait, really?
Just as it doesn't prove that one did occur.
You're going to have to walk me through that. If a director replaces an actor in a movie, the old actor scenes don't end up on the screen. If you replace a vocalist, why wouldn't you erase the old audio file?
Because the world of digital audio distribution and the world of cinematic film editing operate on parallel, often entirely disconnected tracks.
Ah.
A genuine internal production decision to replace a vocalist in the final 5.1 theatrical mix of a movie does not legally require the deletion or takedown of an earlier master that was already authorized for commercial release.
So a studio could theoretically say, we are going to use vocalist B for the final cut that plays in theaters, but vocalist A's version is already out there. It's already licensed for this special OST compilation album. It's generating streams. It's generating revenue. Just leave it up.
Absolutely. The digital availability is totally decoupled from the creative decision-making of the film director.
That is wild.
The existence of the file on a server tells us nothing about the drama or lack thereof in the editing room. Performer compensation, royalty participation, creative pivots, none of this can be inferred from the fact that the song is still live on Spotify.
So if we, as outside observers looking at public metadata, can't verify anything, what can Gwyn's management team actually do?
Well, they have options.
If you are her representation and you want to ensure she is being treated fairly and compensated correctly in this confusing dual master reality, what is on your administrative checklist? And how do you do it without implying that there is some massive dispute or acting hostile toward the studio?
A competent management team has a very clear, legitimate set of administrative touch points they can and should investigate. This is standard operating procedure, not a declaration of war.
Okay, what's step one?
First, they review the paper trail. They look at Gwyn's contractual designation, how exactly was she promised to be billed, and her specific compensation structure.
They check the receipts.
They verify master ownership and the exact scope of the master use license they signed. They make sure they know exactly what rights were handed over and what rights were retained.
What about the movie itself? Can they investigate that?
Absolutely. They can seek to verify the exact usage of her recording within the audiovisual product. Does her specific master appear in the final theatrical cut of the film? Does it play over the ending credits? Is it used in specific promotional trailers?
Right, because as we established earlier, based purely on the supplied public sources, it is currently unverified if her version is actually in the movie, just that she has an official OST release.
Exactly. The public doesn't have verified evidence of her exact placement, but her management has the right to request that data from the studio.
And what about the metadata, the algorithmic minefield we discussed earlier?
Management can perform a comprehensive digital audit. They can check the final cue sheet entry filed with the PROs to ensure proper performance reporting is set up.
Makes sense.
They can audit how the ISRC and UPC are mapping across different global streaming platforms. They can check for territorial availability. Is the song available in Japan, in the US? And ensure that Gwyn Dorado's official artist profile is linked correctly to the track everywhere it lives.
They are essentially acting as digital plumbers. They are going under the sink, making sure the pipes are connected correctly so that the data and ultimately the revenue flows to the right bank account, regardless of what the other track is doing.
It's purely administrative diligence. Investigating these points does not imply a breach of contract. It doesn't imply unpaid royalties, and it certainly doesn't imply she was maliciously demoted. It is simply how you navigate a complex, multi-tiered release in 2026.
Synthesizing this entire deep dive, we have gone from the psychology of a 16-day release gap to the intense reaction of a 14-comment forum down into the labyrinth of sync licenses and ISRC codes.
It's a lot of ground to cover.
It feels like the modern music industry is a maze designed to confuse the public. But when you wipe away the jargon, the final takeaways for you, the listener, are actually quite stark.
Which brings us to the calibrated verdict of this entire situation. We need to separate the signal from the noise.
Let's lay it out clearly. What is the absolute verified truth at the bottom of this deep dive?
The foundation is this. Gwyn Dorado holds a legitimate, officially credited vocal performance for the special OST version of Light of Love. That is an undeniable, concrete fact.
Right.
Furthermore, her recording remains an official, legally sanctioned catalog item. It exists alongside and parallel to HYNN's separate official recording for the main film OST.
2 artists, 2 official masters, 1 underlying song.
Correct. And equally important to what we know is what we must reiterate that we do not know. The profound unknowns surrounding this fact remain entirely unverified.
Yeah.
There is zero supplied evidence proving any of the darker narratives that have circulated online.
There is no proof of removal.
None. There is no proof of mistreatment or a deliberate malicious demotion of Gwyn. There is no evidence of contractual harm, no proof of unpaid royalties, and no documented financial loss.
The black box of production remains closed. The undisclosed reason for commissioning or releasing 2 separate masters remains a total mystery. And as rigorous analysts, we are not going to invent a key to pry it open.
What we can conclude, based entirely on the evidence, revolves around human perception. It's highly plausible that the specific sequence of the releases, putting Gwyn's out first and labeling it as an official OST part, created immense ambiguity.
Oh, absolutely.
This sequenced release strategy, combined with a vacuum of public explanation from the producers, contributed directly to the documented confusion within the 14-comment sample we observed.
It's a classic case of a communication vacuum shaping reality. The fans reacted to the silence based on the sequence of events they experienced. It doesn't make their conspiracy theories true, but it makes their emotional whiplash completely understandable.
Exactly.
However, that confusion should not overshadow the reality of Gwyn's achievement here. She has a verified global catalog asset attached to a major animated film, and that retains its career value regardless of how complex the metadata mapping might be.
The asset is secure, even if the narrative around it was chaotic.
Which leaves us with something really fascinating to ponder as we wrap this up. You know, if you are navigating this with us and you look at the trajectory of the music industry right now, it is in a state of constant, rapid evolution.
It really is.
It is constantly experimenting with multi-version releases, localized versions for different territories, remixes, sped-up TikTok versions, different OST parts spread across different global streaming platforms.
The digital landscape actively encourages fragmentation. It wants multiple touch points for a single piece of intellectual property because it maximizes algorithmic surface area.
Exactly. So here's a final provocative thought for you to mull over. As this kind of complex, multi-tiered release structure becomes the norm rather than the exception, how are artists, management teams, and production studios going to have to adapt their communication strategies?
That's the million-dollar question.
Because right now, the default human reaction, the default fan reaction to a dual release is to view it as a zero-sum competition. It's a battle where one artist wins and the other loses. The real version versus the fake version.
Yeah, the framing is always so combative.
How can the industry communicate these structures so that fans can celebrate the complexity rather than weaponizing it against the artists? How do we move the culture from who replaced who to look at all these brilliantly different interpretations of a great song? That is a cultural shift the industry desperately needs, but clearly hasn't quite figured out yet.